February 16th, 1945. Dawn breaks over Corregidor Island, Philippines. Second Lieutenant Harry Akune crouches in the open door of a C-47 transport plane. Wind screaming past at 140 miles per hour, 500 feet above jagged coral rock and concrete fortifications. His heart pounds. Below him lies the rock, enemy territory. And somewhere down there, though he doesn't know it yet, his war is about to become devastatingly personal. Harry is 28 years old, born in California, raised in America, trained to kill for America, but the faces of the enemy soldiers he will interrogate today share his features. The language they speak is his mother tongue. This contradiction defines every moment of his service in the Pacific. He is American by birth, Japanese by blood, and in 1945 that makes him both weapon and suspect, liberator and threat, all at once. The green light flashes. Harry jumps into empty sky. His parachute snaps open. For a few seconds, there is only wind and adrenaline and the impossible beauty of sunrise over water. Then the earth rushes up to meet him. He lands hard on the parade ground atop Corregidor, rolling through volcanic dust as machine gun fire tears through the morning air around him. The 503rd Parachute Infantry Regiment has just launched one of the most audacious airborne assaults of the Pacific War. Their mission is to retake Corregidor from approximately 5,000 Japanese defenders, who have transformed the island into a fortress of tunnels, bunkers, and death. The Americans think they face only 850 enemy troops. They are catastrophically wrong. This miscalculation will turn the battle into 11 days of brutal close-quarters combat in absolute darkness beneath the earth. Harry's job is different from the other paratroopers. While they advance with rifles and grenades, Harry advances with words. He is a military intelligence service linguist, one of roughly 6,000 Japanese Americans who serve as interpreters, interrogators, and translators during World War II. His weapon is language itself. His mission is to break through the psychological defenses of captured enemy soldiers and extract the intelligence that will save American lives. He does not carry this mission lightly. Every prisoner Harry interrogates looks at him with confusion and rage. They see a traitor, a man who shares their blood but wears the uniform of their enemy. Some spit at him, others refuse to speak. A few curse him as the worst kind of betrayer, a man who has abandoned his ancestors for American money and comfort. What these prisoners do not know, what Harry himself barely allows himself to think about during combat operations, is that half an ocean away, his own family is divided by this same war. His younger brothers are not liberators. They are the defended. The story of the Akune brothers begins not with war, but with the American dream. In 1918, Ichiro and Yukie Akune immigrate to California from Japan, settling in the agricultural town of Turlock. They open a small grocery store. They work 18-hour days. They build a life. Between 1920 and 1933, they have 9 children. Harry is the eldest son, born Masami Akune in 1920. His brother Ken follows in 1922, then Saburo, then Shiro. 5 boys, 4 girls, all born on American soil, all American citizens by birth. The children grow up speaking English at school and Japanese at home, eating hamburgers and teriyaki, pledging allegiance to the Stars and Stripes while learning about Bushido and samurai honor from their father. They are hyphenated Americans before that term carries the weight it will later bear. They exist in the space between 2 cultures, belonging fully to both and sometimes to neither. Tragedy strikes in 1933. Yukie dies unexpectedly. Ichiro, grieving and overwhelmed, makes a decision that will alter the trajectory of all 9 lives. He takes his children back to Japan, to the fishing village of Kagoshima on the southern island of Kyushu, to live with relatives who can help him raise them. The children are uprooted from California and replanted in a country they know only through stories and summer visits. For Harry, who is 13 years old when they move, the transition is devastating. America is home, Japan is foreign. The language feels awkward in his mouth when he tries to speak it properly. The customs confuse him. The school system is rigid and unforgiving. He struggles, but his granduncle, who takes a special interest in the eldest boy, becomes Harry's bridge between worlds. The old man teaches Harry classical Japanese. He instructs him in calligraphy, tea ceremony, the philosophical underpinnings of Japanese culture. Most importantly, he teaches Harry that a man can honor 2 traditions without betraying either. This lesson will sustain Harry through everything that comes next. By the time Harry is old enough to work, he has become fluent in Japanese. Not just conversational Japanese, but the complex military and bureaucratic language that few Americans can master. This skill, learned at his granduncle's knee in Kagoshima, will make him invaluable to the United States Army. It will also force him to hear the dying words of Japanese soldiers in their mother tongue, understanding every syllable, every cry for home and mother, every curse against the Americans killing them. In the late 1930s, Harry and Ken return to California. They need to work. They need to send money back to their father and siblings in Japan. They find jobs. They rent a small apartment in Los Angeles. They try to rebuild the American lives that were interrupted 6 years earlier. Harry works as a gardener and handyman. Ken finds work in a fruit packing plant. They are model immigrants, model citizens, model Americans. This will not matter. December 7th, 1941. Pearl Harbor burns. 2,400 Americans die in 90 minutes. The United States declares war on Japan, and overnight, Harry and Ken Akune transform from citizens into security threats. Their faces become suspect. Their language becomes evidence of disloyalty. Their ancestry becomes proof of potential treachery. Within months, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signs Executive Order 9066. The order does not mention Japanese Americans by name. It does not need to. Everyone understands what it means. It means that Harry and Ken, along with approximately 120,000 other people of Japanese descent living on the West Coast, will be forcibly removed from their homes and imprisoned in camps in the interior of the country. No charges, no trials, no evidence of wrongdoing required, just their faces and their names and the accident of their parents' birthplace. In the spring of 1942, Harry and Ken receive notices. They have 1 week to settle their affairs. They can bring only what they can carry. Everything else must be sold or abandoned. Harry watches neighbors sell family businesses for pennies on the dollar to opportunistic buyers who know desperation when they see it. He watches families pack heirlooms and photographs into boxes they will never see again. He watches children cry because they do not understand why their country has turned against them. On the appointed day, Harry and Ken board a train under armed guard. The destination is Amachi, officially called the Grenada War Relocation Center, located in the high desert plains of southeastern Colorado, 1 mile southwest of the town of Grenada. The camp is surrounded by barbed wire fences. Guard towers equipped with searchlights and machine guns are positioned at regular intervals. The barracks are tar paper shacks, hastily constructed, with gaps in the walls that let in dust and cold and scorpions. Each family is assigned to a single room measuring 20 feet by 24 feet. Privacy does not exist. Dignity is a luxury no longer afforded. A match holds approximately 7,300 people at its peak, making it the 10th largest city in Colorado during the war and the smallest of the 10 War Relocation Authority camps. Most of the prisoners, and that is what they are despite the government's euphemistic language about relocation centers, come from California. They are farmers and shopkeepers, teachers and mechanics, grandmothers and toddlers. 2/3 are American citizens. All are judged guilty by ancestry alone. Harry and Ken adapt as best they can. They work in the camp's agricultural program, growing vegetables to feed the camp population. They attend English classes even though English is their first language. They play baseball in the dust. They try to maintain some sense of normalcy in a place designed to strip away everything normal about their lives. At night, lying on a thin mattress in a room they share with 20 other men, Harry wonders about his brothers still in Japan. He wonders if they are safe. He wonders if they hate him for being American. He wonders if he will ever see them again. The answer to that last question will be yes, but the circumstances will be more complex than he can possibly imagine. In early 1943, the United States Army begins recruiting from the camps. Military officials realize they have a critical shortage of Japanese linguists. The few white Americans who speak Japanese are mostly academics who know classroom Japanese but cannot understand military terminology or regional dialects. The few Americans of Japanese descent already in the military before Pearl Harbor number only a handful. If America wants to win the Pacific War, it needs interpreters who can interrogate prisoners, translate captured documents, and break enemy codes. It needs the very people it has imprisoned as security threats. The recruiters arrive at Amache with an offer that feels like mockery. Join the army, prove your loyalty, serve the country that has stripped away your constitutional rights and imprisoned you without due process. Help defeat Japan. Help kill the people who look like you, speak your language, share your heritage. Some Japanese Americans refuse. How can they serve a government that has betrayed them so completely? How can they risk their lives for a nation that considers them enemy aliens? Their anger is righteous and earned. But Harry and Ken see the offer differently. They see an opportunity. Not for revenge, not for redemption. Simply for recognition. A chance to demonstrate that loyalty is not determined by blood but by choice. That citizenship means something beyond ancestry. That being American is a conscious decision renewed daily, not an accident of birthplace. They volunteer. They pass the background checks. Though the irony is not lost on them that the government conducting these checks is the same government that imprisoned them without any evidence of disloyalty. They are accepted into the military intelligence service language school, which by 1943 has relocated from San Francisco to Fort Snelling in Minnesota to avoid the complications of training Japanese Americans in the coastal exclusion zones from which they are banned. The training is intense. 6 months of immersive instruction in military Japanese. The students learn to read military maps, technical manuals, strategic documents. They practice interrogation techniques designed to exploit cultural vulnerabilities. They memorize thousands of kanji characters used only in military contexts. They study the organizational structure of the Imperial Japanese Army down to the squad level. They learn to think like the enemy in order to anticipate the enemy. Harry excels. His years in Kagoshima, those long afternoons with his granduncle learning classical Japanese, give him an advantage most Nisei students lack. He can read complex texts. He understands cultural nuances. He knows how to speak to a Japanese soldier in a way that conveys respect while still extracting information. These skills will make him one of the most effective interrogators in the Pacific Theater. Ken thrives as well, though his path diverges from Harry's. Ken is assigned to the Office of War Information in Burma, where he will create propaganda materials designed to convince Japanese soldiers to surrender. He will write leaflets in Japanese that appeal to honor and survival. He will craft radio broadcasts that chip away at enemy morale. His words will save lives by preventing battles that do not need to be fought. In August 1942, the Akune brothers graduate from the Military Intelligence Service Language School. They are commissioned as second lieutenants. They are issued uniforms, weapons, and orders. Harry is assigned to the 33rd Infantry Division and will later be attached to the 503rd Parachute Infantry Regimental Combat Team. Ken deploys to Southeast Asia. Both brothers head into the unknown, carrying with them the complicated burden of fighting a war against their ancestral homeland to prove their loyalty to their adopted one. What neither Harry nor Ken knows, what they cannot know because communication with Japan has been severed completely, is that their younger brothers Saburo and Shiro are also going to war, but not for America. In Kagoshima, life under wartime mobilization grows increasingly harsh. Food is rationed. Young men are conscripted. American B-29 bombers begin appearing in the skies, their payloads transforming Japanese cities into infernos. The government intensifies its propaganda campaigns, portraying Americans as barbaric demons who will rape and slaughter every Japanese civilian if the homeland is invaded. The message is clear: fight to the death. Surrender is unthinkable dishonor. Saburo Akune, third of the 5 brothers, is drafted into the Imperial Japanese Navy in 1943. He is 20 years old. He is assigned to the Naval Air Force as a spotter for kamikaze pilots, the suicide attackers who will throw themselves at American ships in the desperate final stages of the war. Saburo's job is to identify targets, to calculate approach vectors, to guide young pilots toward their deaths. He does this work with competence and growing horror. He watches boys his age climb into aircraft, knowing they will never return. He sees the resignation in their eyes. He hears their final letters home, dictated in shaking voices to officers who promise to deliver them to grieving parents. Shiro Akune, the youngest of the 5 brothers, is only 15 years old when he is drafted in 1944. He is too young for combat deployment but old enough to serve. The Navy assigns him to the Sasebo Naval Base as an orientation trainer for new recruits. He teaches young conscripts how to salute, how to march, how to maintain their rifles, how to die honorably for the emperor. Shiro performs these duties mechanically, aware that the boys he trains today will be dead in weeks or months. He watches American Grumman torpedo planes attack the harbor, their engines screaming as they strafe ships and docks. He stands helpless as vessels sink and comrades burn. He is a child participating in the machinery of war, too young to fully understand the implications of what he is witnessing, but old enough to carry the trauma forever. Neither Saburo nor Shiro knows that their brothers are fighting for the other side. Communication between Japan and America has been completely severed. The Akune family has been split by war into two opposing camps, each side convinced of the righteousness of their cause, neither side aware that they are fighting against their own blood. The war in the Pacific is unlike any conflict in human history. It is a war of annihilation fought across thousands of miles of ocean, a war where surrender is considered worse than death, a war where cultural misunderstandings lead to atrocities on both sides. It is also a war that will be ended by technology that fundamentally changes the nature of warfare itself. Harry Akune experiences this war in fragments, each fragment a small contained horror. He participates in the Battle of New Guinea, interrogating prisoners in the jungle heat, surrounded by insects and disease and the constant threat of ambush. He moves to Leyte in the Philippines, translating captured documents that reveal Japanese troop movements and defensive positions. He parachutes onto Mindoro, landing under fire, his mission to secure intelligence from the local population and captured enemy soldiers. The interrogations blur together. Scared conscripts who cry for their mothers. Fanatical officers who spit defiance even as they bleed out from their wounds. Civilians caught in the crossfire, terrified of both the Americans and the Japanese soldiers who have occupied their lands. Harry speaks to all of them in Japanese, his voice calm and professional, extracting information that will guide artillery strikes and infantry assaults and aerial bombardments. He tries not to think about what this information means. He tries not to imagine the faces of the men who will die because of the intelligence he provides. He tries not to hear the screams in Japanese, the prayers in Japanese, the desperate final words in Japanese, but he hears them all. He understands every syllable. And each night, when he finally allows himself to sleep, the voices follow him into his dreams. Then comes Corregidor. February 16th, 1945. The jump Harry makes at dawn, the jump that opens this story, is part of Operation Topside, the most dangerous airborne assault in the Pacific Theatre. The 503rd Parachute Infantry Regiment is tasked with retaking the Rock, the island fortress that surrendered to Japan in May 1942 after months of siege. MacArthur himself has ordered this operation, desperate to erase the humiliation of that earlier defeat, determined to demonstrate American dominance as the war approaches its climax. The paratroopers have been training for weeks, but nothing prepares them for the reality of Corregidor. The drop zones are tiny, barely larger than parade grounds, surrounded by cliffs and ruins and minefields. The aircraft must fly at dangerously low altitude to give the paratroopers any chance of landing in the designated areas. Many do not. Men crash into concrete buildings. They land in minefields and are blown apart. They get tangled in their chutes and are shot while helpless. 21 paratroopers die just from the jump itself before they ever fire a shot. Harry lands hard but survives. He gathers his gear and moves toward the assembly point, dodging machine gun fire from Japanese positions hidden in the ruins of old barracks and bunkers. The battle for Corregidor will last 11 days. It will be fought mostly underground, in the miles of tunnels the Japanese have carved into the volcanic rock. It will be close-quarters combat with grenades and flamethrowers and trench knives. The kind of fighting where you see the face of the man you kill. Harry's role is to interrogate prisoners as they are captured, to extract tactical intelligence before it becomes obsolete. He sets up his operation in a bombed-out building, working by the light of a single lantern, interviewing wounded enemy soldiers who are brought to him in chains. Some cooperate. Most do not. The ones who do often provide information that saves American lives, revealing the locations of ammunition dumps, command posts, hidden entrances to tunnel complexes. One prisoner, A young private barely 20 years old tells Harry about his family in Hiroshima. He has not heard from them in months. He does not know if they are alive or dead. The American firebombing campaigns have destroyed most Japanese cities. Millions are homeless. Hundreds of thousands are dead. The boy weeps as he speaks, not from fear of captivity, but from fear of what has happened to his family. Harry listens. He records the information. He passes the intelligence up the chain of command. Then he moves on to the next prisoner. There is no time for empathy. Empathy is a luxury that will get Americans killed. On February 26th, after 11 days of brutal fighting, Corregidor is declared secure. The Americans have won, but the cost is staggering. The 503rd Parachute Infantry Regiment suffers 28.5% casualties. 844 men killed, wounded, or injured out of 2,962. The Japanese casualties approach 100%. Nearly 6,000 defenders die, only 20 surrender. The rest fight until they are killed, or commit suicide rather than face the dishonor of capture. Harry survives. He is exhausted, traumatized but alive. He has done his job. He has provided intelligence that helped win the battle. But the victory feels hollow. Too many good men are dead. Too many prisoners have refused to cooperate, choosing death over the perceived shame of providing information to the enemy. The cultural gulf between American and Japanese concepts of honor has been paid for in blood. General Douglas MacArthur visits the island on March 2, 1945. He stands on the parade ground where Harry jumped 3 weeks earlier and delivers a speech to the assembled paratroopers. He praises their courage. He congratulates them on avenging the defeat of 1942. He declares that the American flag will never again be hauled down from Corregidor. Harry watches this ceremony with mixed emotions. He is proud of what his unit has accomplished. He is grateful to be alive, but he cannot escape the knowledge that somewhere in Japan, his brothers are experiencing this war from the opposite perspective. They are seeing American aircraft overhead, hearing American bombs explode, watching their country burn. He does not hate them for serving Japan. How can he? They had no choice, just as he had no choice. They are all caught in forces larger than individual will or family loyalty. After Corregidor, Harry continues serving as an interpreter as American forces prepare for the invasion of the Japanese home islands. The planned operation, codenamed Operation Downfall, is projected to cost over 1 million American casualties and potentially 10 million Japanese deaths. The battles for Iwo Jima and Okinawa have demonstrated that Japanese defenders will fight with suicidal intensity to defend their homeland. Every soldier, every civilian, every child with a sharpened bamboo spear will become a combatant. The invasion will be an apocalypse. It never happens. On August 6, 1945, a single B-29 bomber named Enola Gay drops an atomic bomb on Hiroshima. The city is incinerated in seconds. 70,000 people die instantly. Another 70,000 will die from radiation poisoning in the following months. 3 days later, a second atomic bomb destroys Nagasaki. On August 15th, Emperor Hirohito announces Japan's surrender in a radio broadcast that most Japanese citizens have never heard his voice before this moment. The war is over. After 4 years of slaughter across the Pacific, the killing finally stops. But the consequences of those 4 years will echo through generations. Harry and Ken Akune are reassigned to the Allied occupation forces in Japan. Their new mission is to help demobilize the Japanese military, process prisoners of war, and assist in the reconstruction of the devastated nation. In October 1945, they receive word from their father. He is alive. He is in Kagoshima. He wants his sons to come home. Home. The word has become complicated. Is home California where they were born? Is it Japan, where they lived for 6 years as children? Is it the army, the only institution that has treated them as full citizens during the war? Harry is not sure anymore, but he knows he needs to see his father. He needs to know that his family survived. Harry and Ken request leave and travel to Kagoshima. It is their first visit to Japan since returning to America in the late 1930s. The country is unrecognizable. Cities are flattened. Infrastructure is destroyed. People are starving. The proud empire that attacked Pearl Harbor 4 years ago has been reduced to rubble and desperation. Kagoshima itself has been spared the worst of the bombing, but the psychological devastation is total. Japan has never lost a war in its modern history. The concept of defeat is alien, incomprehensible. The American occupation is seen by many as the ultimate humiliation. foreign soldiers walking freely through streets where Japanese sovereignty once held absolute. Harry and Ken arrive at their father's house wearing their American uniforms. They do not know what to expect. Will they be welcomed? Rejected? Attacked as traitors? Ichiro Akune opens the door. He is older, greyer, worn down by years of war and worry. But he is alive. He embraces his sons. No words are spoken for a long moment. There is too much to say and no way to say it. Then Ichiro steps back and calls into the house. Two other young men emerge. They are also wearing uniforms, though theirs are tattered and stained, the uniforms of the defeated Imperial Japanese Navy. They are Saburo and Shiro. The four brothers stare at each other. None of them knew. Until this moment, none of them knew that they had been fighting on opposite sides of the war. The realization hits like a physical blow. Saburo speaks first. His voice is tight with anger. He demands to know how Harry and Ken could betray their blood, how they could fight for the country that dropped atomic bombs on Japanese cities, how they could participate in the humiliation of Japan. The war may be over, but the wounds are fresh and Saburo is bleeding rage. Harry tries to explain. He talks about Amache. He talks about the choice between military service and indefinite imprisonment. He talks about wanting to prove that Japanese Americans are loyal citizens. His words sound hollow even to his own ears. Ken attempts a different approach. He argues that America was right, that Japan's military aggression left America no choice, that the war was necessary to stop Japanese expansion. Saburo and Shiro react with fury. They describe American atrocities, the firebombing of civilians, the atomic weapons that killed women and children. They argue that Japan was defending itself against Western imperialism. The argument escalates. Voices rise. Old grievances surface. Saburo reveals that he guided kamikaze pilots to their deaths, and the implication hangs in the air unspoken. Those pilots attacked American ships, perhaps ships that Harry's intelligence helped protect. Shiro describes watching American planes strafe the harbor at Sasebo, killing his friends and fellow sailors. Ken counters with stories of Japanese atrocities in China and the Philippines, of prisoners tortured and civilians massacred. The argument threatens to turn physical. Saburo stands. Shiro stands. They are ready to fight their own brothers, to continue the war in miniature form inside their father's house. Ichiro Akune has heard enough. He is an old man who has lost his wife, seen his children scattered across the Pacific, survived a war that killed millions. He will not lose his sons to continued hatred now that the killing has finally stopped. He shouts a single word: enough. The room goes silent. The four brothers turn to their father. Ichiro speaks slowly, his voice carrying the weight of authority earned through suffering. He tells them that the war is over. He tells them that they were all victims of forces beyond their control. He tells them that they are brothers before they are anything else, and brothers do not destroy each other over the decisions of governments and generals. He tells them to shut up. He tells them to sit down. He tells them that they will not leave this house until they have made peace with each other. The silence that follows is long and uncomfortable. No one speaks. The four brothers sit in the wreckage of their relationship, surrounded by the wreckage of their country, trying to find a way forward. Gradually, over hours and days, they begin to talk again. Not about politics. Not about who was right and who was wrong. Those questions have no answers that will satisfy everyone. Instead, they talk about what they experienced. They describe the fear, the exhaustion, the moments of grace and horror that defined their individual wars. They discover that their experiences, while opposite in allegiance, are similar in trauma. Harry talks about interrogating dying prisoners. Saburo talks about watching kamikaze pilots depart on one-way missions. Ken describes creating propaganda designed to break enemy morale. Shiro talks about the terror of being 15 years old during an aerial bombardment. They realize that they were all frightened. They were all traumatized. They were all trying to survive in circumstances that gave them limited choices. This does not erase the anger. It does not resolve the fundamental disagreements about the war, but it creates space for something more important: the recognition that they are still family, that blood ties persist across political divisions, that forgiveness is possible even when understanding is not. The Akune brothers will never fully agree about World War II. Decades later, they will still argue about who was right and who was wrong, about America's use of atomic weapons, about Japan's military aggression, about the internment camps, but they will argue as brothers, not as enemies. The war divided them, Their father's intervention and their own choice to prioritize family over politics reunited them. In 1946, Saburo and Shiro emigrate to the United States. They move to California and rebuild their lives in America, the country that defeated their nation, but offered them opportunity nonetheless. In 1950, when the Korean War begins, both Saburo and Shiro are drafted into the United States Army. This time, all four Akune brothers fight on the same side. The irony is not lost on any of them. Harry Akune continues his service in the military intelligence service through the occupation period and beyond. He becomes one of the most respected Nisei linguists, known for his skill and professionalism. He receives numerous commendations for his service, but his greatest regret, the one he will carry for the rest of his life, is that he never found the courage to thank his granduncle in Kagoshima, the old man who taught him Japanese, who bridged cultures for him, who gave him the tools that allowed him to serve his country, died during the war. Harry never got to tell him how much those lessons mattered. Ken Akune also continues serving, eventually settling in California and dedicating his life to preserving the history of Japanese-American military service. He volunteers with the Go for Broke National Education Center, which documents the contributions of Nisei soldiers. He gives speeches to high school students. He tells his story over and over, not for glory but for memory. He wants people to know what his generation endured and accomplished. Saburo passes away several years before the turn of the century, taking his memories of kamikaze spotting with him. Shiro, Harry and Ken all live into old age, settling in Southern California, seeing each other regularly for family gatherings where they carefully avoid discussing politics but cannot stop discussing history. In 1988, 43 years after the war ends, the United States government officially apologizes for the internment of Japanese Americans and approves reparation payments to survivors. The apology acknowledges that Executive Order 9066 was fundamentally unjust, that it violated the constitutional rights of American citizens, that racial prejudice rather than military necessity motivated the mass imprisonment. For the surviving Japanese American veterans, this recognition comes too late to erase the trauma, but not too late to matter. It is an admission that their loyalty was never in question, that their sacrifice was not in vain, that history will remember them as heroes rather than suspects. In 2010, Congress awards the Congressional Gold Medal to the Japanese American soldiers of World War II, including the 6,000 members of the Military Intelligence Service. The award recognizes contributions that were kept classified for decades, stories that could not be told while the Cold War continued. Major General Charles Willoughby's assessment that the Nisei linguists shortened the Pacific War by 2 years and saved possibly 1 million American lives is finally given official acknowledgement. The story of the Akune brothers is not unique. Across America and across the world, World War II divided families, forced impossible choices, created situations where brothers fought brothers and sons fought fathers. The 20th century's bloodiest conflict was also its most intimate, reaching into homes and tearing apart relationships that should have been sacred. But the Akune story is also exceptional in one crucial way. These brothers found their way back to each other, despite fighting on opposite sides, despite the anger and betrayal and trauma, despite every reason to let the war poison their family forever. They chose reconciliation over revenge. They chose family over politics. They chose to be brothers again. This choice was not easy. It required difficult conversations. It required setting aside certainties and accepting ambiguities. It required acknowledging that there are no heroes and villains in family stories, only people trying to survive impossible circumstances as best they can. It required Ichiro Akune's wisdom and authority to create the space for healing. But mostly, it required his son's willingness to walk through that space toward each other. The deeper truth about war, the truth that the Akune brothers embody, is that it destroys far more than lives. It destroys certainties. It destroys the illusion that the world can be divided neatly into good and evil, us and them, right and wrong. It forces people into situations where every choice carries moral weight, and no choice is entirely right. It reveals that patriotism and loyalty are complex concepts that look different depending on which side of a conflict you are born into. Harry and Ken Akune were not traitors to Japan. They were Americans defending their country against an aggressor that attacked them without provocation. Saburo and Shiro were not traitors to America. They were young men conscripted into military service by the only government they knew, fighting to defend their home from invasion. All 4 brothers were loyal. All 4 brothers were courageous. All 4 brothers were victims of a global conflict that gave them no good options and forced them to choose between impossible alternatives. The question of who was right in World War II has obvious answers when we look at Nazi Germany's genocidal atrocities or Imperial Japan's brutalities across Asia. Moral clarity exists at the strategic level, but moral clarity dissolves at the individual level, where ordinary people are conscripted into extraordinary evil, where survival requires compromise, where doing the right thing depends entirely on which country's uniform you happen to be wearing. The Akune brothers demonstrate that it is possible to hold multiple truths simultaneously, that America was right to defeat Japanese militarism, that the internment of Japanese Americans was a profound injustice, that Japanese soldiers who fought to defend their homeland were not inherently evil, that American soldiers who killed those Japanese soldiers were not inherently virtuous, that war creates impossible situations where good people must do terrible things, that family ties can survive even when everything else is destroyed. This is the lasting lesson of their story. Not that war is glorious, not that sacrifice is noble, not that loyalty to nations supersedes all other obligations. Rather, that even in the midst of total war, even when brothers are forced to opposite sides of a conflict, humanity persists. Love persists. The possibility of reconciliation persists. It requires work and wisdom and willingness to see beyond uniforms to the people wearing them, but it persists. 75 years after World War II ended, we live in a world increasingly divided by politics, religion, nationality, race. Families split along ideological lines. Friends become enemies over policy disagreements. Communities fracture into hostile camps that refuse to speak to each other. The polarization feels new, but it is not. It is the same dynamic that split the Akune family, only without the excuse of global war to justify the division. The Akune brothers show us a different path. They show us that it is possible to disagree fundamentally about the most important questions while still maintaining relationships. That it is possible to fight on opposite sides and still be brothers. That reconciliation requires someone, usually an authority figure like Ichiro Akune, to step in and say enough. That healing requires time and difficult conversations and willingness to prioritize relationship over righteousness. They also show us the cost of division. Harry Akune carried guilt for decades about fighting against his ancestral homeland. Saburo and Shiro struggled with the shame of serving a defeated empire. All 4 brothers were traumatized by their wartime experiences in ways that marked them permanently. Their reconciliation did not erase that trauma. It only made it bearable by ensuring they did not have to carry it alone. War transforms everything it touches. It transforms nations, technologies, cultures, individuals. But the most profound transformation is often the most personal. The moment when soldiers take off their uniforms and become brothers again. The moment when enemies recognize each other's humanity. The moment when abstract political concepts give way to concrete human relationships. In February 1945, Harry Akune jumped out of an airplane over Corregidor, fully prepared to kill Japanese soldiers to complete his mission. In October 1945, he sat in his father's house in Kagoshima across from his brother Saburo, who had guided kamikaze pilots to attack American ships. Between those 2 moments lies the entire tragedy and possibility of human existence. The capacity for violence, the necessity of violence in certain circumstances, the imperative to move beyond violence when circumstances change, the hard work of reconstruction, not just of buildings and cities and nations, but of families and relationships and trust. The Akune brothers rebuilt what war had broken. Not perfectly, not completely, but sufficiently. They chose each other over their government's enmities. They chose family over ideology. They chose love over hate. These choices did not come naturally or easily. They came through deliberate effort, through difficult conversations, through the wisdom of a father who refused to let war claim his sons, even after the shooting stopped. This is their legacy. Not just that they served with honor on opposite sides of World War II, but that they found their way back to brotherhood afterward, that they demonstrated reconciliation is possible even after the most profound division. That family can survive war if people are willing to do the work of healing. That brothers can meet on the battlefield and still embrace when the fighting ends. In our own divided time, when political differences feel like moral absolutes and compromise feels like betrayal, the Akune brothers offer a different model. They show us that it is possible to hold strong convictions while still maintaining relationships with those who hold opposite convictions. That it is possible to fight for what you believe in without dehumanizing those who fight against you. That it is possible, with effort and grace and time, to find common ground, even in the wasteland left by war. They show us that brotherhood is not about agreement. It is about recognition, the recognition that shared blood matters, that shared history matters, that the ties that bind us are stronger than the forces that divide us if we choose to make them so. This choice, repeated daily across small moments and major conflicts, is what separates families that survive from families that fracture. It is what separates societies that heal from societies that collapse into permanent antagonism. Harry, Ken, Saburo, and Shiro Akune made that choice. They made it despite every reason not to. They made it because their father demanded it, and because they were wise enough to listen. They made it because they understood, perhaps better than most, that war only ends when people decide to stop fighting, not when governments sign treaties, not when territory is conquered, but when individuals choose peace over continued conflict, reconciliation over revenge, family over faction. This is the untold story of World War II, not just the battles and strategies and technologies, but the intimate personal wars that continued in homes and hearts long after the public war ended, the difficult work of reassembling shattered relationships, the courage required to forgive when forgiveness seems impossible, the wisdom to recognize that everyone involved in war is both victim and perpetrator, damaged and damaging, deserving of both judgment and compassion. The Akune brothers fought on opposite sides. They met on the battlefield, though not in combat. They were divided by war and reunited by choice. Their story is one of tragedy and reconciliation, of division and healing, of war and peace. It reminds us that beneath the uniforms and flags and ideologies, we are all just people trying to survive, trying to do right, trying to protect what matters most. And sometimes, if we are very fortunate and very wise, trying to rebuild what war has destroyed.